My name is Margaret Johnson, and I am 75 years old today. As I sit on this old wooden chair by the window of my little apartment, I often look back on the different chapters of my life. People see me now, gray hair, wrinkled face, soft voice, and they think I lived a simple, quiet life. But no, my child, there were days that shook me to my bones. Days when I thought the ground would give way beneath my feet. And today I want to tell you one of those stories. It was the day I turned down my college teacher when I was just 17 years old, and he looked me straight in the eyes and promised to fail me. Yes, you heard me right. A man much older than me, who was supposed to be my guide and mentor, decided to use his power over me. And all because I said no. That day changed the course of my life in ways I could never have imagined. But before I tell you how it all unfolded, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? Is it New York? Maybe California? Or are you sitting somewhere in the South like Georgia or Texas? Wherever you are, I want you to listen closely because this is not just my story. It is a lesson about strength, about courage, and about standing firm even when the world tries to bend you. Now, let me take you back to when I was 17, a young girl full of dreams and a heart full of kindness. My parents had worked hard to get me into college. My father, James, was a factory worker who came home with grease on his hands and a tired smile on his face. My mother, Helen, was a gentle woman who always told me, "Margaret, no matter how the world treats you, you must never stop being kind. The world needs kindness more than it needs cleverness." I carried those words with me everywhere I went. That is why, even in the darkest times, I tried to see the good in people. But life has a way of testing us, doesn't it? It puts us in situations where kindness is not enough. You must also be brave. In college, I was one of the youngest in my class. I was shy at first, but I loved learning. Books were my escape. They opened windows into worlds I never thought I'd see. My best friend back then was a girl named Susan Miller. Susan was lively, always laughing, with curly brown hair that bounced when she walked. She was my anchor, and we promised to stay friends no matter what happened in school. But then there was Mr. Robert Andrews. He was my history professor, a tall man with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. At first, I thought he was just strict, the kind of teacher who didn't let students slack off. But little by little, I began to see another side of him. One afternoon after class, he called me to stay behind. I thought maybe I had done something wrong, maybe I had missed a question on the last test. But when the room grew empty and the sound of footsteps faded in the hallway, he leaned against his desk, crossed his arms, and said words I will never forget. "Margaret," he said softly, "you're a smart girl. Pretty too. You know, a man like me could make things easier for you. If you spend some time with me outside class." My heart stopped. I was only 17. I had never even gone on a proper date before, and here was my teacher, my professor, asking me out as if it were the most normal thing in the world. My throat went dry, my palms sweaty. But somehow I found my voice. "Sir," I whispered, "I can't do that. It wouldn't be right." For a moment he just stared at me, his eyes narrowing. Then he smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the kind of smile that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand. "You'll regret that," he said coldly. "If you think you can pass my class after this, you're mistaken. I decide who succeeds here, Margaret. And I promise you, I will fail you." Those words hit me like a punch in the stomach. My whole future depended on that class. If I failed history, I could lose my scholarship. If I lost my scholarship, my parents would never be able to afford the tuition. And if I dropped out, all the sacrifices they made for me, the late nights, the money saved, the dreams we shared, would be wasted. I stood there frozen, not knowing whether to cry, run, or scream. And that, my dear, was the moment that changed everything. Now, let me take you back to how I even got to that day in the first place. When I first started college, everything was new and exciting. I remember moving into the dormitory, the small bed, the creaky desk, the smell of books and fresh paint in the hallways. My roommate was Susan, and we would stay up late, whispering about our dreams. She wanted to be a journalist, traveling the world and writing stories about people who had no voice. I wanted to be a teacher, to give children the same love for learning that my mother had planted in me. Life wasn't always easy, though. Many of the students came from wealthy families, while I was just a factory worker's daughter. Some girls wore fancy dresses, carried handbags that cost more than my father's weekly pay. I didn't have much, but I had determination. And Susan always reminded me, "Margaret, you have something money can't buy. You've got grit." But then there was Mr. Andrews. From the first day of his class, I noticed how his eyes followed me more than the other students. First I ignored it. Maybe I was imagining things, I thought. But when he started giving me compliments in front of others, when he started asking me to stay after class for extra help I didn't need, I began to feel uneasy. Still, I didn't want to think badly of him. My mother always taught me to see the good in people, and so I told myself maybe he was just being supportive. Maybe he wanted me to succeed. But deep down I knew something wasn't right. And then came that day when he asked me out and I turned him down. And when he promised to fail me, my heart shook with fear. What would I do? Could I tell someone? Would anyone believe me? A poor girl of 17, over a respected professor? If I stayed quiet, my future could be destroyed. If I spoke out, I might be laughed at, silenced, or worse. That night, I sat in my dorm room, staring at the ceiling while Susan slept peacefully. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I bit my lip to keep from waking her. My mind raced with questions, each one heavier than the last. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, something happened the next day that shook me even more. The next morning I walked into the history class with shaky hands. My stomach churned as if I had swallowed stones. Every step toward the classroom felt heavier than the last. I told myself over and over again, "Margaret, just sit down quietly. Blend in. Pretend nothing happened." But when I entered the room, my world tilted. On the blackboard in bold white chalk were the words, "Some students think they are better than their teacher. Such students always learn the hard way." The students chuckled as they took their seats, whispering, pointing, though no one said my name. Still I knew, felt it. Those words were meant for me. When Mr. Andrews entered, his eyes caught mine for a brief moment. Cold, dark, like daggers cutting into my chest. He began his lecture as though nothing had happened, but every word he spoke carried an edge. He called on me more than anyone else that morning, asking questions that were nearly impossible to answer. When I stumbled, he smirked. When I hesitated, he shook his head slowly, almost with delight. I felt humiliated, small, like I didn't belong in that classroom. Susan squeezed my hand under the desk once, giving me a look that said, "Don't let him break you." But deep down I was already breaking. After class, as we walked across the campus courtyard, Susan said, "Margaret, what's going on? He's been targeting you more than anyone else. Did you do something?" I wanted to tell her right there, to pour out the secret that had been eating at me since yesterday. But fear tightened its grip around my throat. What if she didn't believe me? What if she told someone, and the story twisted until it came back to hurt me? So instead I shook my head and whispered, "I don't know why he's treating me this way." That was the first time I lied to Susan, and it weighed on me like a stone in my pocket. That evening I tried to distract myself with little acts of kindness. My mother's words echoed in my head. The world needs kindness more than cleverness. So I helped a new student carry her heavy books to her dorm, and I shared my bread with another girl who hadn't eaten dinner because she was short on money. For a moment, as they smiled at me, I felt lighter. Maybe kindness could shield me. Maybe if I just kept doing good, nothing worse would happen. But life doesn't work that way, child. The very next day, as I entered class again, I noticed something strange. My name had been removed from the attendance sheet. My heart sank. It was as though I had vanished, as though I didn't exist in his class anymore. I gathered my courage, waited until the students left, and went to his desk. "Sir," I said quietly, my voice trembling, "my name is missing from the attendance sheet." He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and looked at me with a smirk. "Oh, is it? Well, perhaps I don't recall you being here. After all, Only the students who cooperate with me deserve to be remembered. His words burned like fire in my ears. I clenched my fists to keep from crying right in front of him. He was not only threatening me, he was already starting to erase me. That night, Susan found me sitting by the dorm window, staring at the dark sky. She said softly, "Margaret, you've been different these past few days. You're carrying something heavy. Please tell me. Whatever it is, we can face it together." Her kindness nearly broke me in two. But before I could speak, before I could confess the truth, a knock came on our door. It was the dorm supervisor, holding an envelope. "Margaret Johnson?" she asked. My heart pounded as I took it. Inside was a letter, written in neat, sharp handwriting. It said, "If you continue to resist me, not only will you fail, but your scholarship will be reported as invalid. Think carefully before you ruin your family's sacrifices. R.A." The room spun around me. My hands shook so badly that the paper slipped to the floor. Susan bent down, picked it up, and read it aloud before I could stop her. Her eyes widened. Her face turned pale. Then she looked at me and whispered, "Margaret, is this what you've been hiding?" And just like that, the secret I had buried so deeply was no longer mine alone. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the chaos inside my dorm room. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the knob. Books I had carefully stacked were now ripped and scattered like trash. My notebooks, filled with hours of study and hope, lay torn down the middle. And right there on my bed, the letter screamed at me in bold handwriting. "Stay silent or you won't just lose your scholarship, you'll lose everything." My knees went weak. I felt as though the floor had been pulled out from under me. Susan rushed in behind me, gasped, and covered her mouth with her hands. "Oh my God, Margaret," she whispered. She bent down, picked up the letter, and read it again, her face growing pale. "This isn't just about failing you anymore. He's threatening your whole life." Tears stung my eyes. I sank onto the bed, clutching the edge so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Susan, what am I supposed to do? If he can get into our room, if he can tear my things apart, then he can do anything. He has power I don't have." Susan sat beside me, wrapping her arm around my shoulders. "Listen to me. He wants you afraid. That's what bullies do. They thrive on fear. But we can't let him win. We need to report this to the dean. No, higher than the dean. Maybe the board of trustees." I shook my head. "And what if they don't believe me? What if they think I made it all up? I'm just 17, Susan." "He's a grown man with a title and respect." Her eyes flashed with fire. "Then I'll testify. I saw the letters. I saw what he wrote. They'll have to believe us both." Her determination gave me a spark of hope, though doubt still gnawed at me. Later that evening, we quietly cleaned up the room. I taped the notebooks back together as best I could, though the pages looked like scars. I folded my clothes, put my books back on the shelf, trying to erase the violence of what had been done. When the lights were out and Susan drifted into restless sleep, I lay awake, staring into the darkness. Mama's words echoed in my mind again. "The world needs kindness more than cleverness." But kindness felt powerless against this. What good was kindness when a man could threaten to destroy everything I had worked for? What good was kindness when fear held me by the throat? The next morning, Susan insisted we go see the dean. I hesitated but finally agreed. We walked together through the long hallway of the administration building, our footsteps echoing off the tall walls. The dean's office door stood tall and polished, almost intimidating. Dean Thompson was an older man, round glasses perched on his nose, his gray hair slicked neatly back. He looked up from his papers when we entered. "Yes, how may I help you ladies?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. My throat locked tight. Susan glanced at me, then stepped forward. "Dean Thompson, we need to talk about Professor Andrews. He has been..." But before she could finish, the dean raised his hand, his face growing serious. "I know why you are here," he said firmly. We froze. My heart pounded. He knows. The dean folded his hands and leaned forward. Mr. Andrews has already come to me with concerns about you, Miss Johnson. He says you've been disrespectful in his class, refusing to follow instructions, and trying to spread rumors to cover your poor performance. Now, what exactly do you have to say for yourself? My breath caught in my chest. The room spun. He had beaten me here. He had twisted the story before I even had a chance to speak. Susan jumped in, her voice sharp. That's a lie. Margaret has done nothing but work hard. We have proof, letters he wrote threatening her. The dean raised an eyebrow. Letters? Do you have them with you? Susan reached into her bag and pulled out the crumpled letters. My hands shook as she laid them on his desk. Dean Thompson adjusted his glasses, studied the handwriting, then sighed heavily. He set them down and looked at us with a weary expression. These are serious accusations, he said slowly. But you must understand, the word of a professor with years of service holds more weight than the claims of a student. Unless you can provide undeniable evidence, it will be your word against his. Tears welled in my eyes. My stomach dropped. This was exactly what I feared. Susan stood up, furious. So you're just going to let him keep threatening her? You'd rather protect him than protect a 17-year-old girl. The dean cleared his throat, uncomfortable. I advise you both to tread carefully. Challenging a professor's reputation could have consequences. And with that, the meeting ended. We left the office in silence, the letters clutched in Susan's hand. My heart felt crushed, like all the air had been stolen from me. That night, as I sat by the window again, watching the moonlight fall across the courtyard, I thought of giving up. Maybe I should just let him fail me. Maybe it would be easier to leave than to keep fighting a battle I couldn't win. But then, just as I began to drift into despair, Susan came running into the room, her face flushed, her breath heavy. She slammed the door shut behind her. Margaret, she whispered urgently, you won't believe what I just overheard near the library. Professor Andrews was talking to another teacher. And if what I heard is true, we finally have the kind of evidence that could destroy him. Susan leaned against the door, her chest rising and falling as though she had run across the entire campus. Her eyes were wide, sparkling with both fear and excitement. What did you hear? I whispered, my heart racing faster than hers. She swallowed hard, then said, I was walking past the library when I heard Professor Andrews talking to Mr. Collins, the math teacher. He didn't know I was there. He said something about how he's done this before, how he's taken care of stubborn girls in the past, and how no one has ever dared to speak against him because he always gets rid of the evidence. Gasp. My hands flew to my mouth. Susan, are you sure? Did he really say that? Susan nodded fiercely. I swear it, word for word. And Collins didn't even look surprised. He just told Andrews to be careful this time. That means this isn't the first time, Margaret. He's been doing this to other girls too. The room spun around me. My heart broke at the thought of other young women, just like me, suffering under his threats, his power, and staying silent out of fear. My blood boiled with anger, but at the same time, a heavy wave of dread washed over me. Susan grabbed my hands. Don't you see? This is what we needed. If we can find one of those other girls, if we can get her to talk, then it won't just be your word against his. It'll be a pattern. Proof. For a moment, hope flickered inside me. But then reality came crashing back. And how do we find them, Susan? Do you think they'll just raise their hands and admit it? They're probably too scared to say a word. Susan's jaw tightened. Then we'll make them feel safe. We'll let them know they're not alone. Margaret, this is bigger than you and me. We can't let him keep hurting people. I stared at her, tears brimming in my eyes. She was right. But the thought of standing up to a man like Mr. Andrews, who had the dean in his pocket and years of influence on his side, made my knees shake. The next few days we moved carefully. Susan whispered to a few girls she trusted, trying to see if anyone else had felt uncomfortable around Mr. Andrews. Some lowered their eyes and hurried away, fear written all over their faces. Others pretended not to understand. It was clear. His shadow stretched far across the campus. One afternoon, while I sat under the old oak tree reading my tattered notebook, a girl I barely knew approached me. Her name was Linda Parker, a quiet second-year student with long blonde hair that usually covered her face. She sat down beside me nervously, glancing around before speaking. "I heard you and Susan asking questions about Mr. Andrews," she whispered. My heart jumped into my throat. "Yes." Her lips trembled as she spoke. "You're not the first. Last year, he tried the same thing with me. He threatened me when I refused. I was too scared to say anything. I barely passed his class, and only because I begged him not to ruin me." Tears filled her eyes and mine too. "Linda, I'm so sorry," I whispered. "You didn't deserve that." She shook her head. "None of us did. And if you're brave enough to fight him, then I'll stand with you." For the first time I felt less alone. The chain of fear that had bound me began to crack. Just a little. Susan was right, if more of us stood together, maybe, just maybe, we could break his power. That night, the three of us met secretly in our dorm room. We whispered plans like soldiers preparing for a battle. Linda agreed to write down her story and sign it, so it wouldn't just be my word against his. We decided to gather as much evidence as we could. Letters, testimonies, anything, to present to the Board of Trustees directly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of courage warming my chest. Maybe we could win. Maybe truth would finally outshine the lies. But just as that hope took root, disaster struck. It was late, well past midnight, when a sudden pounding rattled our door. Susan leapt up, startled, while Linda froze in fear. My heart stopped as the knocks grew louder and louder, echoing through the hall. And then a voice boomed on the other side of the door, deep, cold, and unmistakable. "Open this door at once. It's Professor Andrews." The pounding on the door shook the walls of our tiny dorm room. My heart thudded so loudly I thought it might leap out of my chest. Susan whispered, "Don't open it." Linda sat frozen on the bed, her hands trembling in her lap. The knocking grew harder. "Miss Johnson, I know you're in there," his voice barked. "Open this door now." I swallowed hard. My voice was a whisper. "If I don't open, he'll make things worse." Susan grabbed my arm. "No. If you open it, you'll be alone with him. That's exactly what he wants. Stay quiet. He can't just break into our room, there are rules." But her words did little to calm me. Each pound on the door felt like a hammer striking my chest. Then, as suddenly as it began, the knocking stopped. Silence filled the hallway. We sat still, listening to the heavy sound of footsteps retreating down the corridor. Linda exhaled shakily. "He knows," she whispered. "He must have found out we're talking." Susan clenched her fists. "Good. Let him know. The more he pushes, the more proof we have of what he is." I wished I could borrow her courage. But inside I was still that 17-year-old girl terrified of losing everything. That night, none of us slept. Every creak of the hallway, every shadow under the door made my heart leap. When morning came, we agreed to move quickly. Linda had written down her story, and we hid it under a loose floorboard in our room. Susan insisted we make copies in the library, so even if one was destroyed, another would survive. The calmer hours of that day gave me a moment to breathe. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we had a real plan. During lunch, we even allowed ourselves a small smile as we whispered over our sandwiches. "If we stay together," Susan said, "he can't break us." But fate has a cruel way of testing courage. That afternoon, as I walked into class, I noticed whispers rippling through the rows of students. Heads turned. Eyes followed me. Confused, I slid into my seat, clutching my notebook tightly. Then I saw it. Pinned to the blackboard at the front of the room was a sheet of paper. My sheet. It was one of my personal notes, pages I had written late at night about what Andrews had done to me. Words of fear, anger, and desperation. Somehow he had gotten hold of it. And now he had displayed it for the entire class to see. Gasps and muffled laughter filled the air. Some students leaned over to read, others exchanged knowing glances. My blood ran cold. My deepest fears, my private thoughts, they weren't safe anymore. He had stolen even that from me. And then the classroom door opened. Professor Andrews strode in with a smirk on his face, looked directly at me, and said loudly for everyone to hear, "Well, Miss Johnson, would you care to explain this nonsense to the class?" Laughter echoed around the classroom. I sat frozen, my face burning hot while my classmates' eyes bore into me. Some whispered, others smirked, but no one spoke up. The paper on the blackboard fluttered slightly, the handwriting unmistakably mine. My private words. He threatened to fail me. I don't know what to do. He has too much power. I felt stripped bare. "Miss Johnson," Professor Andrews pressed, his voice dripping with mockery. "Do you want to share with the class why you've been scribbling such wild fantasies about me?" A lump formed in my throat. My heart screamed at me to stand up and shout the truth, but my body trembled like a frightened child. Before I could speak, Susan stood up so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You broke into her room and stole her notes. Everyone here should know the truth. He's been threatening Margaret." Gasps rippled through the room. Andrew's smirk faded into a snarl. "Sit down, Miss Miller, or you'll find yourself expelled before the week is over." But Susan didn't back down. She looked around at the other students. "You all laugh now, but he's done this to others. Linda, tell them." Linda sat in the corner, pale as chalk. Her lips parted, trembling, but no sound came out. Fear had its grip on her, the same way it had held me for so long. Andrews saw her silence and pounced. "Exactly," he said, his voice booming. "Baseless lies from children who cannot handle discipline. I will not tolerate this slander any longer." The class went quiet, the air thick with tension. Felt my hope sink. If even Linda couldn't speak, what chance did I have? When the class ended, I rushed out in tears, Susan following close behind. "Margaret, don't give up," she whispered fiercely. "He wants you broken. But we're close, I can feel it." That evening, as I sat by the window clutching my notebook, I thought of Mama's words again. Kindness, Margaret. Always kindness. But what good was kindness against cruelty like his? And then, in the darkness of the night, a decision took root inside me. I would no longer cower. I would no longer let him write the story of my life. But what I didn't know was that the very next day, he would make his boldest move yet. The following morning, I was summoned to the dean's office again. My stomach churned as Susan walked beside me. When we entered, Dean Thompson was not alone. Sitting there, his hands folded neatly, was Professor Andrews. His sharp smile cut through me. "Miss Johnson," the dean began gravely, "serious accusations have been brought forward against you. It seems you've been spreading false rumors to damage the reputation of a faculty member. I am afraid if this continues, your scholarship will be revoked and you may face suspension." The words struck like daggers. I wanted to shout, to cry, to show the letters, to bring Linda here and force her to speak. But Andrews sat there calm, confident, like a man who knew the game was already won. Susan slammed the letters on the desk. "Here. Look again. These are his threats, not rumors." The dean sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Miss Miller, forged papers prove nothing. Do you think we've never seen young girls attempt to discredit a professor before?" Tears burned my eyes. I felt like the walls were closing in. This was the end. But then, something unexpected happened. The door creaked open, and a voice spoke from behind us. I can't stay silent anymore. It was Linda. She stood trembling, her hands clenched, but her voice steady. "He did it to me too. Last year. He threatened me. He tried to ruin me." The room froze. Andrew's confident smile faltered. Dean Thompson's face hardened. "Is this true?" Linda stepped forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes. I was too scared to say it before, but I won't let him hurt Margaret the way he hurt me. Andrews leapt to his feet, his face red with rage. Lies. She's lying. But the shift had already begun. The dean's eyes narrowed. This is no longer a matter of rumor. These are multiple testimonies. For the first time, Andrews looked rattled. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed into Susan's arms, sobbing with relief. For a moment it felt like we had finally won. But that night, as I walked back alone from the library, a dark shadow stepped out from behind a tree. It was Andrews. His eyes glowed with fury. He grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt and hissed into my ear. "You think this is over, little girl? You've just started a war you cannot win." His grip burned into my skin. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst. "Let go of me," I cried, struggling against him. He leaned closer, his breath hot and venomous. "I've ruined girls before and I'll ruin you. Do you think one shaky testimony will save you? I'll bury you so deep no one will remember your name." I yanked my arm free and ran, my legs carrying me faster than they ever had before. I didn't stop until I reached the dorm, where Susan and Linda pulled me inside and locked the door. I collapsed, gasping, tears streaming down my face. When I told them what happened, Susan's eyes blazed with fire. "Enough. We can't just play defense anymore. If the dean won't act fast enough, then we go higher. We take this to the trustees, to the newspapers if we have to. He can't silence all of us." Linda nodded, though she still shook with fear. "I'll tell my story in front of anyone. I don't care anymore." Her bravery sparked something inside me. Maybe this was what Mama meant all along. Not that kindness alone could save me, but that kindness, when joined with courage, could light a fire no darkness could put out. The next day, we gathered every piece of evidence we had. The letters, Linda's written testimony, even statements from other girls Susan convinced to come forward. Together we walked to the Board of Trustees' office, our hearts hammering, but our steps steady. 4 hours, we sat in that room as Andrews tried to defend himself. He twisted words, raised his voice, accused us of conspiracies. But this time he was not facing one frightened girl. He was facing a wall of truth. And truth has a power that lies can never kill. When it was over, the board dismissed him from the college immediately. His face turned red. His hands shook with rage, but he was finished. His reign of fear was broken. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. I dreamed of Mama's gentle face, whispering, "Kindness and courage, Margaret. Together, they are unstoppable." But the story did not end with his dismissal. Because when you break a man like Andrews, you never know how far he'll go for revenge. And 3 days later I found out. As I returned from class, I opened my dorm door to find a brick thrown through the window, glass scattered across the floor. Tied to the brick was a final note. The shattered glass crunched under my shoes as I stepped into the dorm room. The wind whistled through the broken window, carrying the bitter chill of evening. Susan picked up the note, her hands trembling. "He's gone from the school," she whispered. "But he's still watching us." Linda's face went pale. "What if he comes back? What if he hurts one of us?" Fear rippled through me again, but this time it didn't paralyze me. Instead, it hardened into resolve. "No," I said firmly. "We've lived in his shadow long enough. He may try to scare us, but we are not his victims anymore." The 3 of us made a pact that night. We would not live in silence or fear. Susan wrote a detailed report of everything that had happened. Linda and I co-signed it, and together we sent copies not just to the trustees, but to the local newspapers and even the mayor's office. A week later, the story broke across town. Headlines shouted the truth. College professor exposed for threatening female students. Women came forward, more than we ever imagined, sharing their stories, their pain, their silence. Suddenly, Andrew's power was gone, stripped bare under the light of truth. The police opened an investigation. He vanished from town soon after, but whispers said he never found another teaching job again. He became a ghost, while we, his so-called stubborn girls, became stronger than ever. Years later, when I stood in my first classroom as a teacher, I looked into the bright eyes of my young students and made a promise to myself. Never would I use power to hurt another. Instead, I would use it to lift them higher. Now, at 75, looking back, I still remember the fear, the nights of tears, the letters that made me tremble. But more than that, I remember the courage that rose up inside me, the friends who stood by my side, and the truth that broke through the darkness. To you listening now, wherever you are, never forget. Kindness matters, but when kindness is joined with courage, no bully, no threat, no lie can ever silence you. That was the year I turned down my college teacher when I was 17, the year he promised to fail me, the year I almost lost everything, but gained something far greater, the strength to never bow to fear again.